deliberately contracted the American money supply by 33%. This created a full-blown, long-duration, deflationary depression. In 1963, Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman proved that the Fed could have stopped the Depression at any time merely by pumping debt-free money into the system. This was ignored for about 40 years, and until on the occasion of Milton Friedman's 90th birthday on November 8th of 2002, Ben Bernanke, then only a member of the Fed's Board of Governors, admitted this deliberate contraction during his speech commemorating Friedman's birthday. You aren't going to believe this quote if you don't know it. I would like to say to Milton and Anna was his academic writing partner, regarding the Great Depression, you're right, we did it. We're very sorry. But thanks to you, we won't do it again. Well, surprise, surprise, it has happened again and again and again. Down through all history, the same old scam has stolen wealth by the manipulation of the money supply. It's the same thing that Jesus reacted violently when he chased the money changers out of the temple. So here we go. Why don't we know this? Why doesn't the general public know this? 3 reasons. The media is mortgaged to the max from the bankers. Without having their loans rolled over periodically, the media would be out of business in a week. They can't even pay the interest on their loans, much less the staggering principal on these loans. I know this from first-hand testimony of my friends in the industry, that J.P. Morgan calls the shots. I know the president of one of the 3 ABC, NBC, CBS networks on the radio side. I know both him and his executive producer. His executive producer is my best friend in the media business. And when I first put out The Secret of Oz, I sent it to them and I figured they'd ignore it, as usually. But they called me up and said, "This is great." And I said, "Great? Why? Why do you think it's great?" He said, "Because we hate those bastards at J.P. Morgan." I said, "Why?" And he explained that the way Morgan controls, and it's Morgan. Morgan, for some reason, is in control of these major media outlets.
The Prime Minister and President of
Please, please. If you break my pattern, I go nuts. I fall apart. So anyway, Morgan, yeah. Anyway, it's not that they own the media, it's that they own the media. They own them through lending. The major media outlets are all mortgaged out to the max, just like every American is encouraged to refinance their mortgage right up to the max, keep them right on the edge. That's the same thing with the media. They can't even pay the interest. If Morgan doesn't roll over the loans, they're out of business in a week, and they all know it. That's the control. That's why I'll never be in the major media there. At least not for a while. Maybe the tipping point. So, the second reason we don't know about this is the politicians won't tell the truth. They depend on the banks and Wall Street firms for the biggest campaign donations. The third reason is the economics professors won't tell us the truth. Robert Auerbach, a former investigator with the House Banking Committee, found out that there are only about 1,000 monetary economists working in the U.S. today. According to Joshua Rosner, a Wall Street analyst who correctly called the 2008 meltdown, the Fed has a lock on the economics world. There's no room for other views. The only way you can actually get in a journal is by subscribing to the views of one of the journals. So there's no more economic freedom, and you'll see that in the video clip I play at the end. So, solutions. Obviously, the normal information pathways have been blocked by the banks and the Fed, the media, the politicians, and the professors. So the only path left to us is to go to the alternative media and directly to the people through the internet. But the remedy is actually really simple and easy for the average person to grasp. Every nation needs to do 3 things. Number 1, forbid national borrowing. Sovereign nations do not have to borrow. The borrower becomes servant to the lender. It's right out of the Bible. And in the case of nations, the lenders are mostly the biggest banks. In the U.S., do you know what the percentage of the budget is that currently goes to servicing the national debt? Here's a screenshot from the U.S. national debt clock I took just a few hours ago. Our federal spending is over $3.5 trillion per year. The interest we pay on the national debt is $223 billion, and I think that's grossly underestimated, but we'll just go with that for the time being. That's about 6% of the budget, $223 billion a year, a payment that is entirely unnecessary. Nations do not have to borrow. Nations can create. Why would you borrow when you can create?
Yes.
But do you know what percentage of the yearly budget Israel pays?
And 1/3. About 1/3.
Well, that's if you include interest and principal. We don't even calculate principal payments in the United States because we pay no principal. We only pay the interest. And we don't even pay that. At least Israel pays some principal. It's 10.6% if you're just counting the interest, not the principal. So here's the breakdown. The total budget is $405 billion. The principal, shekels. $98 billion goes to principal. $38 billion goes to interest. $59 billion goes to your defense. $39 billion goes to education. $30 billion goes to welfare. That interest payment and the principal payment, you can argue, which makes up 1/3 of the budget, is entirely unnecessary. Why do you do this? As Professor Richard Werner says you'll see later on. Why do they issue bonds? Why do nations issue bonds? I just can't take questions right now.
No questions. Can you, Bill, please can you just turn the text 1 second?
Now, of this $38 billion in interest, not all of this interest is going to banks. It's important to mention that some portion of this is going to repay bonds bought by individuals for savings bonds. This is not bad debt. This is good debt because this is more like the government is helping you save. It's not that the government is really borrowing. The bad debt is when Israel sells bonds out into the open marketplace. That's the deadly debt. That's the debt that should be outlawed. In the United States, for example, I don't know what percentage of Israel's debt burden is actually good debt versus bad debt. I can tell you the U.S. example. Excuse me? 75%. Is bad debt?
How much?
Is good debt. Okay.
How much?
He says 75% is good debt as a result of savings bonds. In the United States, it's about 60% is totally bad debt. It's bonds sold directly to banks, central banks, foreign and domestic, or related financial institutions. That's the most deadly the form of debt. So, we don't need banks lending to government. The correct configuration, and if you understand nothing else, of course this is the third thing I've said, if you understand nothing else, but if you understand nothing else, understand this: the correct configuration is that government should be lending to banks. As Napoleon put it, the hand that gives is above the hand that receives. So, the second thing that we need to do is issue debt-free sovereign money again. All nations need to issue this kind of money. They need to put an end to consolidated currencies like the euro. You shouldn't have any type of monetary system above the nation state. We need to uphold the nation states. You know, the main factor that runs through the core of the American Constitution is a term that's never mentioned in the document itself. It's called the separation of powers concept. The founding fathers of the United States very wisely knew that you had to separate powers and make them competing. And so what is the separation of powers concept on the international level? What is the concept that keeps all nations relatively free? What has allowed us to even get this far with our escape from serfdom? It's the individual nation state and the power therein. We have to uphold that. Once we sufficiently breach the nation state, then nothing can hold freedom together from that point on. Power won't do it. The third thing is forbid fractional reserve lending. We need banks. No experts ever bothered to actually go to the Bank of England Museum and actually ask one of their experts about any of their gold bug theories. No, they were quite happy just to issue their opinions without any facts.
That's what they do with money, too.
Maybe so. So when I created my second film, The Secret of Oz, I was determined to go back to the Bank of England and ask its head curator this exact question. Were tally sticks only used as a medium of exchange for large purchases? So here he is, John Keyworth, the head of the Bank of England Museum, explaining how tally sticks worked for the common person.
In the Middle Ages, the average size was reckoned to be the length from the tip of his thumb to the tip of his forefinger, quite short. Because if you think of it in terms of this is £6,000. I mean, it's a huge sum of money.
So now what were the gold bugs to do? Well, unfazed, they began attacking me as a lover of fiat money. Because in the gold bug belief system, only gold can serve as money. And so here's one of our favorite friends, Mr. Ron Paul. Come on, Ron, don't be shy.
The Constitution said that only gold and silver can be legal tender.
That's a very important brief clip. Ron Paul says that the U.S. Constitution says that only gold and silver can be legal tender. That's absolutely wrong, and anybody who has the slightest study of the U.S. Constitution knows it. What Ron Paul's up to, I don't know, but he is a disinformation agent. Well, that's not what the Constitution says, and I won't go into it tonight because we started late, but if the question comes up, I'll try to answer it briefly. So here's the basic philosophical reason gold cannot be the primary form of a nation's money. That is, if your goal is to provide a decentralized governance in the public interest. Gold is concentrated money. It is the ultimate in centralizing the money power. Now maybe it's not the ultimate, maybe Bitcoin is even worse. I'm not sure. The Bitcoin experiment is ongoing, but I don't like what I see so far. Gold bugs hate it when I point out this fact. But here is a letter written by J.P. Morgan to his brother in 1885 that states his gold bug philosophy. As a man of sense, I am a gold bug and support a gold bug government and a gold bug society. As a man of the world, I like confusion, anarchy, and war. Anybody want to vote for this guy? So if I can accomplish just two things with my visit to Israel, it would be to hammer home the point that, number one, instead of abolishing government, we have to take back self-governance. And number two, that gold cannot serve as the primary form of money. Gold can never serve the public interest. It can never serve the interest of the commonwealth. It always serves the interests of the money masters, those who will seize back this 1,000-year outbreak of human freedom and put we, the 99%, back in our serfdom shoes just as soon as they can do it. Now, I just want to say that gold and silver coin have an important place in a money system as a complementary currency. That's why I was the only monetary reformer to sign on to the Utah Legal Tender Act. I went out to their convention, and there were 16 guys, and we were all lined up at a big table, and the first guy spoke at the far end, and like I was the last guy. So I said my piece, and they didn't like it much because I was against gold as the primary form of money. But I do support it as a complementary currency. Monetary reformers have no reason to fear gold or silver coin. Complementary currencies serve two very important roles. Number one, to keep the debt-free government-issued money honest by providing an important alternative. And two, to help organize our forces. What I hear all the time after I finish talking is, gee, that's great, what can I do right away? And, you know, all you can really do is, you know, go and pressure your parliament or run for office or, you know, more long-term things. But complementary currency gives something that people can grab onto right away and start to organize, and you organize within your community generally, and it's a great consciousness-raising exercise, and also serves a very valuable other purpose.
So it serves the purpose on the real time, on the now.
Yeah,
not on the long run, but on the now. It's really the answer. It's something that you are contradicting yourself.
I support it completely. So you see, the vast majority of us want economic stability. In fact, what's the so-called science of economics this is what it's supposed to be all about, to create a stable platform for all of us to use fairly and equally, one which is created in the public interest. But has this been the case for the past 100 years? No. The privately owned central bank system that has virtually taken over the world has done nothing but run up all kinds of debt, creating a constant churning of the economy, with bubbles and crashes. We, the people, never make out from these instabilities, but someone does. So yes, gold money systems can create stability if the owners of gold want stability. An example of this was in the post-Civil War period in America, where we saw periods of spectacular economic expansion, punctuated by severe and deliberate contractions in the money supply under a gold-only money system. Why? So that the money masters could milk the American economy for their benefit. Remember, stability benefits all citizens equally. Instability benefits only the money masters. But does a gold-only money system create stability automatically? Definitely not. America was on a gold money system during the crash that led to the Great Depression of the 1930s, which incidentally was a worldwide event. Gold money did nothing, zero, to prevent the 1930s crash. 1930s, Professor Irving Fisher, one of the authors of the Chicago Plan, nationalize money but do not nationalize banking. Now, there might be cases where, for example, a nation could set up a certain lending authority, especially in a transition period. Someone asked me before, what are you going to do with if the banks aren't lending now very well for real estate to we the little people? What are you going to do if you make it even worse? Well, the nation could set up some sort of a special lending authority. It's not unusual. In fact, in the United States, that's what Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae were supposed to do. But of course, they abused their power just like the banks. We found out as a result of the 2008 congressional hearings that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, instead of maintaining a reserve requirement of 10%, were lending at a rate of 80-to-1. We found out J.P. Morgan and the big banks were leveraged 52-to-1. This is in complete violation of any type of regulations. They're just doing whatever they want. Goldman Sachs was leveraged 333-to-1. It's an absolutely lawless society right now, and you're about to see Professor Sachs of Columbia University, who just flipped out at a conference at the Philadelphia Fed on April 17th, and he just ranted about the illegality at the top of the American financial system. But perhaps the most powerful quote of them all is from the Cross of Gold speech by William Jennings Bryan, made at the 1896 Democratic Convention, which I tried to paraphrase very ineptly, and here's the exact quote. Those who are opposed to this proposition tell us that the issue of paper money is a function of the bank, and that the government ought to go out of the banking business. I stand with Jefferson rather than with them, and tell them, as he did, that the issue of money is a function of the government, and the bank should go out of the governing business. So our solution is nothing new. We're just going back to a time before the bankers learned to control not only politicians, but the media and the academic community as well. A recent example of this is in Canada during the Great Depression of the 1930s. The 1930s depression was a worldwide event. It hit Canada very hard, and their politicians took a much more practical approach. They asked themselves the same questions we are asking our governments today, but under the emergency conditions, they were forced to act. They passed legislation creating a truly publicly owned central bank, the Bank of Canada in 1930. This bank issued debt-free money to pay for a full welfare program, a full health care program, and no tax increases. And this was in the depths of the Great Depression. This brought Canada out of the Great Depression very quickly. Then came World War II. Canada spent heavily for their war effort. And look at the debt. It's almost completely flat. You can see a little bump right here during the war. But that's it. Almost completely flat. No borrowing. Debt-free government-issued money. But then in 1973, the bankers managed to convince enough politicians to privatize the Canadian money system once again, borrowing the vast majority of Canada's money once again, and look what happened. The last red line on the left is only 2007. Imagine if I just didn't have time to find the appropriate graph, but it's probably almost doubled from there. It's totally unsustainable. So here's Canadian unemployment, 1967 to 2011. Kind of a similar thing, especially if you look at the bottom, the troughs. So now in the time remaining, I'd like to play the final 15 minutes of my film, Jekyll Island, which is the solutions section. Then I'll take questions. Is everybody okay with that, or do you want to take questions right away? Today's Fed is nothing but a private monopoly over the nation's money. It pretends to be able to control how much money banks create out of nothing as loans. But as we found out during the 2008 congressional hearings, instead of lending out only 10 times as much money as they actually have, the biggest banks were lending out 50 times as much or more. Why haven't we heard this before? Why isn't this common knowledge? Why isn't the root of our economic problems taught in every classroom around the world? Because